Lucas Brown was 67 years old. He lived alone in a small house in Connecticut. Every day, his life was quiet and slow. He no longer worked, he was retired. A long time ago, Lucas was a police detective. He helped people, he solved many cases, he worked hard and cared deeply. But those days were now in the past. Lucas had no wife, no children. His friends were all gone or moved far away, some had died. His house was small, with only a few old photos on the wall. He had a soft brown chair, a wooden table, and a clock that ticked slowly every second. He spent his evenings reading books or writing notes in his notebook. Sometimes he walked alone in the park. Sometimes he sat by the window, listening to the quiet. One night, Lucas sat in his chair with a glass of water. It was late. The room was dark. Only one small lamp was on. The clock on the wall showed almost 11. Outside, the street was empty. The world was sleeping, but Lucas was not tired. He could not sleep. His thoughts were busy. He often thought about the past, about the cases he had worked on. Some of them were never solved. One case, especially, never left his heart. The Henderson case. Suddenly, the phone rang. The sound was loud and sharp. It broke the silence in the room. Lucas looked at the phone. He waited a moment. It was very late. Who would call at this hour? He picked up the phone. "Hello," he said. There was a short silence. Then a voice spoke. It was quiet and shaky. "Lucas, it's me, George Riley." Lucas sat up straight. George. He had not heard that name in almost 10 years. George Riley was his old partner at the police department. They had worked together for many years. They were close friends, almost like brothers. "George," Lucas said, "is everything okay?" "No." "Not really," George said. His voice was weak. "I wouldn't call this late if it wasn't serious." Lucas could feel something was wrong. His heart started to beat faster. "What's going on?" he asked. George paused. Then he said, "Do you remember the Henderson case?" Lucas froze. Of course, he remembered. It was a case from many years ago. A young man named David Henderson disappeared. His car was found near Lake Monroe, but David was never found. The case stayed open for a long time. Then, it was closed. But Lucas never believed the story they wrote in the reports. Deep inside, he always felt something was missing. Something was wrong. "Yes," Lucas said slowly, "I remember." "But the case was closed. They were wrong to close it," George whispered. "Lucas, I found something big. But I need your help." Lucas felt a wave of emotion. So many questions filled his mind. What did George find? Why now? Why after all these years? Before he could ask, the phone went silent. "George," Lucas said, "George," but there was no answer. The call was gone. The line was dead. Lucas stared at the phone. His hand still held the receiver. The room was now even more silent than before. He felt something cold in his chest, worrying, fear, and something else duty. He looked at the old photo on the shelf. It showed two young police officers, smiling. It was him and George, a long time ago. They looked strong and proud in their uniforms. That was the past. But now, something from the past was calling him back. Lucas stood up. His knees hurt a little, but he didn't care. He put the photo down and walked to the window. The night outside was dark and still. He whispered to himself, "This isn't over." In his heart, Lucas knew the call from George was not just a phone call. It was a call to action, a call to truth. Something important was waiting for him, something unfinished. Something that must finally come to light. And so, the quiet life of Lucas Brown was about to change. The past was not done with him, not yet. The next morning, Lucas woke up early. He could not stop thinking about the phone call from George. The voice on the phone was full of fear. Something was wrong. Lucas felt it deep inside. He knew he had to act. He had to find George, and he had to find the truth. He made a cup of tea and looked out the window. The sky was grey. The streets were quiet. Everything felt calm, but Lucas's heart was not calm. He packed a small bag. He put in a flashlight, a notebook, some water, and the old Henderson case file. Lucas drove to George's house. It was a small, old house on a quiet street. The porch light was still on, even in the morning. Lucas walked up the steps and knocked on the door. No one answered. He waited and knocked again. Still silence. He looked under the flower pot next to the door. The spare key was there, just like always. Lucas opened the door and stepped inside. The house was cold and quiet. It felt like no one was home, but something told him George had been there recently. He looked around the living room. On the table, there was a cup of tea. It was cold now. Next to it was a newspaper, open to the second page. George's jacket was hanging on the back of the chair. It looked like George had been there, but had left quickly. Lucas called out, "George," but there was no answer. He walked to the small study room. When he opened the door, he saw papers on the desk. In the middle of the desk was a folder. On the front of the folder were the words, "Henderson Case." Lucas walked closer. He opened the folder. There were some old papers inside, but something was missing. Some pages were gone. Lucas looked around the desk again. Then he saw a small notebook. George had written something on the first page. The writing was not clear, but Lucas could read it. It said, "It's not over. Meet me at the cabin." Lucas's eyes opened wide. The cabin, he remembered it. It was near Lake Munro. Years ago, they had found David Henderson's car near that lake. There was a small fishing cabin nearby. But back then, it was locked. The owner was not around. The department decided not to check inside. Lucas always thought that was a mistake. Now, he was sure George had gone back to that cabin. Maybe he found something. Maybe that was why he called Lucas. Lucas grabbed his bag and left the house. He drove for more than an hour. The road to the lake was old and rough. Trees stood tall on both sides. The sun was behind the clouds. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Lucas reached the cabin. It looked just like before, small, broken, dust on the windows. The door was closed. He knocked. No answer. He tried the handle. The door opened with a small sound. Inside, the air was cold. It smelled like dust and wood. The cabin had one room. There were 2 chairs, a table, and an old rug on the floor. Lucas looked around. Then he saw something strange. One wooden floorboard looked different from the others. It was not flat. It was a little higher. Lucas walked to it. He bent down and touched the board. It moved easily. Under the board, there was a small space. Inside the space was a box. Tea was old and dirty, but the lock was broken. Someone had opened it before. Lucas opened the box. Inside were many papers. Some looked old, some looked new. There were letters, a few photos, and a notebook. Lucas's hand shook a little as he picked up the items. One photo caught his eye. It was David Henderson. He was standing next to another man. The man's face was not clear. It was hard to see. But something about the face looked familiar. Lucas tried to remember. Had he seen this man before? He picked up the notebook. It looked like David's handwriting. On one page, David had written, "I know the truth now. But they will never let me speak." Lucas read the sentence again and again. His heart began to race. What truth did David know? Who was stopping him from speaking? Lucas put the items back in the box. He looked around the cabin one more time, then he left. That night, back at his house, Lucas sat at his desk. He placed the box on the table. He opened the notebook again. He felt like he was being pulled deeper into something big. Something dangerous. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Lucas stood up. His heart beat faster. He walked to the door and opened it. A tall man stood outside. He wore a black coat and a dark hat. His eyes were cold and sharp. "Lucas Brown?" the man asked. Lucas nodded. "Yes, who are you?" The man smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "I believe you have something that doesn't belong to you." Lucas stayed calm. "What do you mean?" "The file," the man said, "from the cabin. It's not safe for you to keep it." Lucas looked at the man's face. He did not show fear. "Who sent you?" he asked. The man did not answer. He took one small step closer. "We can talk somewhere else," he said. "It's not safe here." "I'm not going anywhere," Lucas replied, "and I'm not giving you anything." The man's smile disappeared. His eyes turned colder. "That would be a mistake, Mr. Brown." Then the man turned and walked away into the night. Lucas stood at the door for a long time. His heart was still beating fast. Something was very wrong. He now knew that someone else wanted the truth to stay hidden. But Lucas also knew something else. He was not going to stop. Lucas could not sleep that night. He sat at the table in his living room. The papers, the photo, the letters, and the notebook from the cabin were in front of him. His hands touched the items one by one. His mind was full of thoughts, so many pieces. But the full picture was not clear yet. He opened the notebook again. It was David Henderson's notebook. Lucas read the pages carefully. Then, at the back of the notebook, between two old pages, something fell out. It was a small paper, folded many times. Lucas opened it slowly. It was a map. The map showed Lake Munro, but it also had more details. There were hand-drawn lines that led from the cabins to a small area deep inside the forest. There was a mark, like an X, in one hidden spot. Lucas looked at the map again and again. He understood now. David had drawn this. Maybe the truth was hidden there. Lucas put the map into his bag. He also took the notebook, the photo, and some water. It was still dark outside, but he did not want to wait. He got in his car and drove toward the lake. On the way, he kept checking the mirror. He felt like someone might be following him, but the road stayed quiet. When he reached the lake, he parked near the old fishing cabins. The forest stood tall and silent. Lucas took out the map and followed the path. The trees were close together. The ground was full of dry leaves. Every step made a soft sound. Birds flew overhead, but everything else felt still. After walking for a long time, Lucas reached the mud place. The soil on the ground looked different. It was loose, like someone had dug here before. He bent down and used his hands to move the dirt. After a few minutes, his fingers touched something hard. It was a wooden box. The box was old, with a rusty lock. Lucas used a rock to break the lock. Inside were letters, some official papers, and one important document, a land paper. It showed that David Henderson owned a small house near Lake Munro. But Lucas had never heard about this house before. It was never in the reports. No one had ever talked about it. Lucas went back to his car. He drove straight to the address written on the land paper. The house was hidden in the woods. It was small and broken. The paint had faded. The windows were covered in dust. Lucas tried the door. It was locked. He walked around the back and pushed hard on a weak door. It opened. Inside, the air was cold. The house looked empty. Papers were on the table. A shelf was broken. On the table, Lucas saw letters. He picked them up. They were written by David. In one letter, David wrote, "I can't stay quiet. They are watching me. Even people from the police are involved." Lucas felt cold. He looked at another paper. It was a photo. David was standing next to a man. Lucas knew that man. His name was Mark Dalton. Mark had worked with Lucas in the past. He was a police officer too. But after the Henderson case, Mark left the job. Now, it made sense. Mark was hiding something. Suddenly, Lucas heard a sound outside, footsteps. He quickly hid behind the broken shelf. His heart beat fast. The door opened. It was the same stranger who came to his house. The man in the black coat. He walked into the room. His eyes looked around. He walked to the table. He picked up the letters. He checked the drawers. Lucas stayed silent, holding the photo tightly. After some time, the stranger left. His steps disappeared into the woods. Lucas waited a few more minutes, then he came out from hiding. He was shaking, but he knew what he had to do. He packed the letters, the photo, and the land paper, then he left the house. Later that night, Lucas received a message on his phone. It came from an unknown number. The message said, "Meet me at the old warehouse." Come alone. Lucas took a deep breath. He grabbed everything, the real papers, the notebook, the photo. He drove to the warehouse. It was at the edge of town. The large door was open just a little. Inside, the room was dark and cold. In the middle, Lucas saw George. He was tied to a chair. He looked weak, but he was alive. Standing next to him was Mark Dalton. Lucas stepped forward. So it was you, he said. Mark looked at him and smiled. You should have stayed out of this. Lucas shook his head. David deserved the truth. And George deserves to live. Mark's eyes turned hard. David found out about the bad things happening inside the department. He wanted to speak, but we stopped him, and now, you want to do the same. Lucas stayed calm. He pulled out his phone. I'm not alone, he said. This call is live. The police are listening. The good ones. Suddenly, sirens sounded outside, lights flashed. Police officers came in through the doors. They arrested Mark and his man. George was untied. Lucas helped him up. Outside the warehouse, Lucas looked at the night sky. It was dark, but in his heart, he felt light. Justice was served. David's name was cleared. The truth had been hidden for years, but it was no longer in the dark. George smiled at Lucas. I knew you'd find me, he said. Lucas nodded. The truth always finds a way. Lucas Brown was an old man when the story began. He lived a quiet life, alone in a small house. He had once been a police detective, strong and brave. But after many years, he had retired. His days were slow, and his nights were silent. He thought his work was finished. He thought the past was behind him. But one phone call changed everything. His old friend, George Riley, called him late at night. George spoke about the Henderson case, a case they never solved. A young man named David Henderson had disappeared, and the truth had never come out. That call woke up something deep inside Lucas. It brought back memories, questions, and responsibility. Lucas followed the clues. He went back to the places he once worked. He searched through old papers, cabins, and forests. He found hidden letters, a secret house, and a photo that showed the truth. He discovered that a man he once trusted, Mark Dalton, had been hiding secrets. Mark was part of something wrong, and when David found out the truth, they silenced him. But Lucas never gave up. Even when people tried to stop him, even when danger was close, Lucas stayed strong. He believed in justice. He believed in truth. And in the end, he saved his friend George and brought the truth to light. This story teaches us something very important. The truth can be hidden, but it never dies. Courage and honesty can still win, even when the world feels dark. In your life, you may face moments when something feels wrong. You may see things others want to ignore. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to do what is right. Like Lucas, stay brave, stay kind, and never stop looking for the truth. Congratulations for finishing this story. By listening and reading to the end, you have improved your English. You learned new words, simple sentence patterns, and you understood a full story in English. That is a big step forward. Now, let's see how well you followed the story. Quiz question. Who was the person hiding the truth about David Henderson? A. George Riley. B. Mark Dalton. Comment below with your answer, A or B. We'll check how many of you got it right. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel so we can continue creating more content for English learners like you. Also, if you want to support us, please consider donating. In the beginning, it's very hard to create high-quality free content. Your support helps us continue this mission to help you learn English through stories. Thank you so much for listening. See you in the next story.